and this goes beyond these casual conversations. We've truly tried to build this blend of adaptability with discipline. In fact, Carlos Ghosn, the chairman of Nissan, world-renowned as a management guru, when he speaks with great deal of respect for India's capability for frugal engineering, there's a big element of this adaptability. We get thrown into the deep end, but somehow we kick our way up to the surface, and I think there is some skill to be learned there. So we need both.
We need the best mix of both. And you felt that in Turkey and Islamabad, maybe?
They have to meet all of the regulations and laws of U.S. Congress, our ethical standards, our equal opportunity standards, and yet also abide by their own law and make the bridge over to the Americans and help us adjust too. And so as a manager in this, communication is absolutely important, particularly on things that they may not be aware that they're liable to because it's a value of the American public. So to make sure that we're constantly explaining to the local staff, why this ethical standard is there. And then making adjustments also for the local culture and explaining back to Washington why you have to do that as well. I mean, at any point in time, we have maybe 200 different countries that are governed under this way. You talked about examples, and one that sticks in my mind is something that would have affected me very badly in Cambodia when I started there as a manager, is that we had an American security guard that had a heart attack overnight. He was guarding the place. He wasn't found until a couple hours later. And I had just gotten to Cambodia about 2 weeks before. And fortunately, one of my American colleagues called me and said, in about a half an hour, the local staff is going to come over. It's a Buddhist society there. And they're going to ask to bring in monks to bless the place where the person had died. This was the first Buddhist culture that I'd been into. And I said, really? Okay. Well, we can't necessarily pay for that with government funds because we're also stuck with this. So I had enough time to be able to talk with my colleagues and talk with the local staff and say, we need to do this because it's important to the staff, and there's going to be a big morale problem that we're not going to know about, and it's going to affect work. And so she was absolutely right. A half an hour later, the staff came in, and I said, thank you, I understand this is very important to you, and with your assistance, we'll go ahead and take care of that. But if it hadn't been there from somebody else clued in that this was a very alien idea for a management issue at one of our posts, I might not have come out with a very appropriate response and would have had to recover and gone back and said, okay, I didn't understand. So that was very helpful. But you see these constantly when you're dealing in other cultures, that you have to adjust where you can for that management to meet the values of the people that you're managing.
That's great. So is there a specific behavior that you had to change, give up some Indianness other than punctuality, Dr. Sumantran?
Well, first, for starters, I had to stop saying yes by shaking my head, that was completely incomprehensible. No, I think one would hope that one can slowly, through exposure, immersion in societies, find ways to perhaps carry forward what one felt were part of one's makeup. And yet, in some way, as we say, we all get internationalized. We perhaps don't completely discard our traditions, our values, our makeup, but we learn skills related to communication, related to, as you have covered so well in your book, etiquette, mannerisms, in such a way that we get appropriately, recognize communication is effective, and hopefully you carry. My own experience has been that we live in a world today where people are far more accepting of multicultures. I mean, most of Europe today, you find a tremendous amount of multiculturalism, particularly in the metro cities. So I don't think people are looking to you to conform. So in really reflecting things that I might have changed, I cannot deny that some of my, like this timing discipline and my continued habit, or my wife and I, we continue to have the habit of being early at parties in the evening. But other than that, I can't think of specific mannerisms.
So you're saying we can have the Indian roots, global wings kind of attitude, which is what I tried to bring into the. Okay, is what I try to. In the book, we try to say, right, that the know India better, know yourself better, and speak up for yourself, and then also be able to communicate with the world. Do you feel that you had to change something, Jennifer? You took a wonderful immersion program on Indian culture. Jennifer and her team spent a whole 2 hours immersing into Indian culture, and we had the opportunity of interacting with you. You've been a very forward-thinking Consul General in that case, because there have been others before you that couldn't take the time to do it, but you have been very sensitive to that. So has that made some changes where you've had to give up doing something, or you've had to learn a new way of interacting?
Well, it certainly was a very useful session. I think we all learned a lot from it, even people who had been here for maybe a year or so. I think over the years, traveling places, that I think my sense of space has gotten smaller. I know in my first assignment, I felt like people were always standing too close, and now when I go home, I feel like my relatives and friends are like, Jennifer, you're too close, stand back a little. So I've adopted, I think, a little bit closer area. I'm also very conscious of my hands and feet in different cultures, because here, whenever I sit down to eat, I'm very conscious where my left hand is, which isn't an issue in the States. I'm also conscious of when people are taking off their shoes and when they're not taking off their shoes, which again is not such a big deal in the States, but could be very disrespectful in certain places here. And that runs across cultures too. The other thing that I see as a newcomer, and I think it's why the Indians that I have seen are very adaptable to this, is that you have such a multicultural society. So coming in here, in my first month, I came in during Ramadan, and I ended up going out to a few iftars. Well, that's a different cultural norm, and it's something that you all live with here. I was down in Kerala and went to a Malayali festival. It's got different cultural norms and rules as well, in addition to Tamil Nadu, and I also cover Karnataka as well. So for me, it's been very interesting to see maybe something that as an Indian you don't see, which is also the multi-pluralist differences between people in your own society living very close together.
Okay, so I'm going to ask if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question now before I do this.
Could I ask you what biggest adjustment you had to make?
What is the biggest adjustment I had to make? I thought that to get on with the Western world, I had to look Western. So in the beginning, when I started this business, I went out and made some really terrible looking Western clothes and tried to fit myself into them. And I was very uncomfortable in them. My family kept saying, oh my God, you look terrible. Why are you doing this to yourself? But I thought that that was what would show professionalism. And then I had to unlearn and say, you can just be yourself. You can just be yourself, and you can adapt to not having frostbite by wearing closed shoes under the sari, but you don't have to completely change the comfort from where you are to adapt completely to the other side. And I had to adapt only on the communication piece. I had to learn to speak slower. I had to learn to, as you said, be able to say no when I know I can't do something. That's, I think, what Prakash was saying. People are getting angry with his hotel, not because it's not the most fabulous hotel, it's just stunning, but because somebody who was offering a service said, yes, I'll do it, but couldn't quite do it, and that is the irritant in customer service. So I had to learn really hard, Jennifer. And only the word no is what you understand as no. If I try to ask you a question back instead, you say to me, Ranjini, can you come at 6 o'clock? And I'm like, 6 o'clock today? That doesn't show you that I'm actually saying, no, 6 o'clock today is not going to work for me. And I'm thinking that I'm giving you this hint by asking you a question back. I have to say, no, actually 6 o'clock may not work. How about 7:30? And so I had to learn to do those kinds of direct communication. And even when I'm being direct, I'm actually being very indirect. So I had to go towards being blunt, which is very hard for Indians to do, and then somehow able to communicate better. I think that's one of the biggest challenges our young force works with, Professor Mantran, in meeting deadlines and having our customers not happy with us. Do you think that's one of the big challenges?
It's true. I think we do find a number of occasions when our staff are often just too, or in their way of thinking, wanting to be polite. So when you're talking about deadlines, commitments, completion of project dates, it's very difficult for them to just outright say, no, it's not possible. Mm-hmm. So their response very often is slightly ambiguous, but if you don't spot that ambiguity, you end up with miscommunication. Right. And I think this happens in degrees. I also believe that, again, during the time that we lived in Sweden, we had a project that involved the Germans, the Italians. This was the GM Fiat alliance in those days. And even between very close cultures, the Swedes and the Germans, you would find marked differences in the way they'd work. And in fact, in the German culture, which was often more formal, more structured, the guy would have worked for 20 years for his boss and he'd still be Dr. Deman. And in Sweden, on the other hand, literally 100 kilometers across the sea, it was unheard of. The young engineer would say, "Do Sumantran," the equivalent of "ni," not "ningo." Mm-hmm. And that was from the second day. Right. And for a young engineer to tell the boss, "do," was natural and expected. And you would often have very polite but clear dissent, which was perhaps not easily visible in other structures. So I think we all bring different cultural traits and experiences even to the workplace. Mm-hmm. And in that particular project, I remember it was a bit like the United Nations. We had Italians from Alfa Romeo and Fiat, we had Germans from Opel, we had Swedes from Saab, and we had Japanese engineers from Isuzu. It was a fascinating observation of these cultures all working in one design area.
Right. So the Real Cultural Intelligence tool is the book, but we also have a little tool which is Upworldly Mobile, a cube, the world. So we decided to give these little cubes away. Please don't leave without your little paperweight of culture intelligence for your little table. And then when you have a phone call, suppose you're selling something, here's how you can change it. Hi, who's this? Oh, it's Jennifer McIntyre. She's from the US. Let's see, what does she want? Offer choices to win her over. Round of applause.